Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine War News Update, first part though for the 27th of September 2024. My goodness, as ever, there's a lot of content to discuss with you today. Not so much in this video, quite quiet to some degrees on the hits and losses front, but lots in the geopolitics, military aid, and I'm going to try and squeeze out an American-US political one today. It depends how much tea drinking I've got to do, which is usually quite a lot. So I'll have to factor that into the schedule for today. Right, let's start with the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. In fact, I just remembered that Dell has contacted me again to say there's another record-breaking day. Let's bring up good old Dell. So yeah, new 7-day moving average on artillery, and drones as well. So the 7-day averages are going up because the last week has been incredibly costly for the Russians. And I think it might be due to Vuhledar down in the south. So that has been surrounded and it's kind of game over for Vuhledar. But Forbes reports that Russia may capture Vuhledar amid heavy personnel and vehicle losses. The potential capture of Vuhledar by Russian forces highlights the enormous cost of their offensive, with losses amounting to nearly 6% of their total vehicle casualties in Ukraine. Now, I don't know what time frame that calculation is being made over. I don't know. I've not had time to look into that, but just take it from me that certainly since the beginning of the time that they started attacking Vuhledar, they have lost inordinate amounts of vehicles, pieces of kit. If you remember the time when it was 155th and 44th, was it? Anyway, Naval Infantry Brigades. You had your crack teams down there. They were throwing like lines and lines of mechanized equipment into the south of Vuhledar, and they lost on one set of attacks. It was like 100 vehicles, and it just continued in that fashion as the Ukrainians were not only peppering them with artillery and mortars and ATGMs and whatnot that they could sight from the top, from on high down to the southern areas, the lower areas of Pavlivka and Mikilska, but also they were using these RAM artillery shells that released loads of mines, and they were just mining the areas, and Russia would just brick wall, head against it, blow up their vehicles on these mines time and time again. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And that was what was going on there. So even back then, they were losing a lot of equipment there. And it appears to be that this offensive on Vuhledar, though it will be ultimately successful if it isn't already, it might well be coming at quite a cost for them. So we have seen these numbers of personnel tick up for the last week. And that does coincide with the increase in activity around that part of the front line. So we'd already had Kursk happening for some time. We'd already had Pokrovsk and all these other places, although Pischany has ticked upwards there. But I think it could be that these much higher numbers for the last 4-5 days, where we've seen it over 1,300 consistently, might be because it's particularly difficult down there as well. For the Russians and ultimately for the Ukrainians, of course, as well. There are some criticisms that the Ukrainians are trying to hold on to that for too long. There are some rumours that came out that Zelensky said, don't lose Vuhledar while I'm in New York doing the UN, etc., or in Washington. I think those were probably Russian rumours trying to cast aspersions on the political nature of defending some of these places, or they could be true. I don't know. Anyway, 1,300 personnel loss is a really high number. 21 tanks is well over double the daily average. That's an incredibly high number of tanks to lose in a day. 48 troop-carrying AFVs is again a significant number, well over double the daily average, and artillery systems over triple the daily average, with 58 being lost in a single day. These are huge numbers. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems as well. Very high drone usage by the Russians, which we have seen every single night, right? 58 vehicles and fuel tanks being lost. Another high number there with 2 pieces of special equipment. So Dell says if you look at the averages and whatnot, which we're going to do, we can see that what do we have? High troop losses, leading to a really, really high 7-day rolling average. 1,384 is incredible there. But yeah, just Russians losing troops hand over fist. 21 tanks, leading to a real uptick in the tank losses, 7-day rolling average of 17.29. That's incredible as well. There, so we have the just a normal mean daily average is 9.3. That's actually ticked up some, hasn't it? APVs at 48 is now at a 17. Let's see if I've got that right. APVs, the daily one day, 37-day rolling average of 37.71. We're losing another 48. Just incredible. Such high numbers there, especially when you consider the daily average is 18.36, and that's ticked up a lot. And then artillery, just final one here, 66.57 as a rolling average there. Sorry, you might not be able to see that because of my stupid face. So 37.71 7-day rolling average, losing another 58. Sorry, talking absolute rubbish. So APVs 37.7 daily average, 7-day rolling average. And artillery 58 lost today, leads a 66.57. That's what he's saying is a record 7-day rolling average. So incredible there. As you can see, the record sits above it. I believe that's how he works that out. So if you're looking at the 7-day rolling average for Ukrainian personnel losses, it's not the record, but it is incredibly high. So you can compare that. There's a really useful sheet, this. Thank you, Dell, for doing all of that. Anyway, no Andrew Perpetual loss list today, which is a real shame because I'd really like to see if these numbers are being reflected. I'm just going to remind people that Spartan News on Twitter, who I interact with quite a lot, does this daily adding up of how much the Russians have lost in terms of equipment, as we normally do. So it's sort of a synthesis of this and the values of the equipment. Now, a huge pinch of salt with valuing the equipment. You know, it's going to be a difficult process doing that. But anyway, that is the value, and it includes value of human beings as well, because you can put a value on that. There are certain theories about how much you value them in terms of monetary evaluations, but as horrible as that may sound. But yeah, take it with a pinch of salt, but it is a useful kind of analysis of the cost of this war in terms of equipment, personnel, and money for the Russians. Okay, so moving on, we have a destruction of another Zoopark 1M counter-battery radar. These are incredibly expensive bits of kit. This is taken out by Gimlers. 2 Gimlers, 1 misses, 1 hits, and that is essentially... Jesus wept. I've done it again. Do you know... Please don't tell me. People keep telling me how to mute it. I know how to mute it. I just missed the thing there, and if I click there, it turns the sound back on. I don't want that. Who's designed that? Which idiot has designed that? Anyway, Zoopark, expensive, blown up, counter-battery, not only degrading the Russian capabilities, but also, they ain't going to get that kind of kit back again in any quick fashion. Right, War Vehicle Tracker says strike on the Ukrainian project 02220 Yaroslavets, a tugboat claimed near Ochakiv in Mykolaiv region. Exact damage to the boat is unknown, but a Lancet drone presumably hit the ship's bridge. So that is, a bit of a shame for the Ukrainians there. You can see a small explosion on that boat. So that is a tugboat used for, one presumes, military purposes, taken out there. Now here we have a Ukrainian anti-air FPV. What's interesting here, Special Kherson Cat says it fails to detonate, because I've been trying to work out whether these drone-on-drone strikes are with drones that have munitions on, or whether they don't, and they just try and smack the other drone out of the sky, if you like. And I don't really know, because what happens is they cut out as soon as they hit, basically, because the drone, loses its camera, because it loses its signal and whatnot as it slams into the other drone. But is that also because it's blowing up? We saw, I paused the video, we saw the silhouette of a drone as it was just coming down to hit the larger reconnaissance drone. We saw the silhouette on the wing, and it looked like it just had a massive battery power pack on it to give it that extra power to get around, to get high up, and to go longer distances or whatever, fly for longer. So the conclusion there was that's probably not an IED, but it probably is a battery pack, but not necessarily so. It could have been an explosive, and that there could be lots of different ways that they do this as well. But anyway, it's just interesting that we have a drone here, a reconnaissance drone, a Zala drone, that was targeted by this FPV drone and actually kind of attached to it, got locked onto it, and then I don't know if that's purposeful actually, or whether it was just got entangled with it, and then the whole drone fell to the ground. This is then being pointed by someone like Magyar or something, I don't know, a commander pointing it out on the screen with a pointer. Interesting. I always wonder whether they can use these drones in any way after they take them out of the sky, like this, or are they done for? Do they just look at the tech and then chuck it away, or use bits they can, so on and so forth. But anyway, that is an example of a drone being taken out of the sky. Now here's an example of a drone giving birth to another drone. This is how baby drones are born, says Andrew Perpetua. So here we have, just to explain what's going on here, we have a drone operator looking at his screen here. So forget all this bit above, that's just what you can see behind his screen. And on the screen you have the drone he's operating releasing another drone into the sky. So this drone is already in the air, up in the sky, you can see the ground below, and that other drone takes off from between its rotor blades there. So interesting. Anyway, that is a mothership, if you like, releasing another drone into the wild. The baby has flown the nest. There you go. Interesting visuals there from that particular drone team. And then, yeah, that's quite a large drone by the looks of it, taking off from there. Yeah. So there you go. Right, we'll move on to Tim White with another Russia on fire blaze. A big blaze has broken out in Vladimir region. It's reported that building materials market is on fire. The cause is not yet known. Another example of a big old blaze in Russia. Right, moving on to strikes. And overnight there was not the biggest wave, but still significant. Still at that, above 30, even above 20 drones being sent every night. Somewhere between 20 and 80, it seems. That is significant, consistent. It's going to be grinding down the Ukrainian psyche and whatever targets they're hitting. It's not immediately obvious as to what they're going for because we don't hear too much, even with the ones that get through. It's potentially strikes on Izmail last night, which is on the Danube River, one of these ports on the Danube. So starting with another tragedy, or more accurately, senseless murder by Russia. 3 pensioners, all oldest is 89, have died in a big attack on Izmail. As the criminal horde continues hitting ports in the Odessa region. 11 others were injured. This time it was drones that attacked Izmail, a port of the Danube just over the river from Romania. A child is among 11 injured. The youngest of the 3 killed was 68. Ukraine needs more air defense. So last night it was obvious that Izmail was the target for some of these drones, but we don't always know. 32 drones were sent last night. 24 were shot down, and one Shahed drone entered Romanian airspace. I don't know if that was then one that was shot down, whether it was lost or whatever. Another one was lost on Ukrainian territory due to electronic warfare. So maybe 25 out of 32 were lost. That gives a good 7. So actually that is one of the poorer interception and takedown rates that we've seen recently. So those 7 drones, 6 or 7 drones, are going to be hitting somewhere, and at least some of them appear to have hit the port of Izmail and unfortunately civilian infrastructure there. 0 out 1 Iskander M or KN-23 ballistic missile was taken down, so that was That got through. Whether it hit its target, I don't know. 0 out of 2 KH-22 cruise missiles were shot down. So both of those got through as well. And now, when it comes to the missiles, likely that Kryvyi Rih was the target there. Missile has hit the main council government building, Kryvyi Rih. People are feared trapped under the rubble. Missile strike was aimed at the police station. The local government building was also partially demolished. There are casualties from Russia's missile strike. Some are still feared under the rubble. Only 3 injuries, though, supported there eventually. Missile hit at 9:15 in the morning, pretty near peak time on weekday for police and local council workers to be in their offices, one would have thought. Now, I don't know if this is actually included in these figures, because that's quite a late strike. So you would have thought that these missiles already would have been counted. So I'm imagining those 3 missiles weren't strikes on Kryvyi Rih, but I could be wrong, of course. Yeah, and there's more detail on that from Tim White's thread. Always worth checking out Tim White's threads on a daily basis. Yeah, so Ishmael and Kryvyi Rih seem to be the main sources of strikes for the Russians overnight and into this morning. Yeah, rescue teams working there in Kryvyi Rih. You get to see some of the damage caused. Again, like, it's either civilian infrastructure or police stations and whatnot, which is not I wouldn't say like top military target. Government administration buildings, I mean, is that responsible prosecution of a war? Near Novoshatinsk in Rostov, the Russian army fights off an unmanned aerial vehicle attack, so a drone attack last night. The latest there, no reports, says 7 drones were shot down near Novoshatinsk in the Rostov region, according to the governor. Debris from the drones caused a grass fire. Local residents noted that the debris fell near power lines. The attack also targeted the Novaya Sokolovka neighborhood close to the Novoshatinsk oil refinery. So while it doesn't look immediately like there was any damage to any critical infrastructure there, we don't know really what's happened. Just one cruddy photograph. It could be that an oil refinery's been hit. It could be that energy infrastructure's been hit, like electricity infrastructure. Or it could be that the Russians successfully took down all of those drones. We just don't know. Moving on to other bits and pieces. There's this a fairly grim Financial Times article that's come out that lots of people are commenting on. Here, Tatarigami says, a grim but insightful article in the Financial Times discusses acute manpower shortages on the front line for Ukraine and inadequate training, while it quotes Ukrainian officials citing 30,000 recruits per month. I mean, that's impressive. After reading the article, you might get the feeling as though Ukraine is struggling to get any recruits. One of the reasons is that after completing training, new recruits are often assigned to newly formed brigades, even if they had a reference from another unit that recruited them. As a result, experienced brigades like the 72nd, now heavily engaged in Vuhledar and fighting since day one, are losing their veteran corps without properly passing that experience to fresh recruits, as most are directed to new units. In short, the problem isn't a lack of willing Ukrainians, recruitment numbers are up, but rather a bizarre management decision on top. This is something that has been a problem for the Russians, right? We've long been criticising the Russians for this. So take those 2 naval infantry brigades down in Vuhledar. They're no longer there. I think they're up in, certainly 155th is up in Kursk. They were, so 155th, if I remember correctly, were reconstituted somewhere between 3 and 9 times, probably even more now, which means that they've been attrited, taking heavy losses time and time again. And you go from being a cracked unit full of experienced troops, and remember, with these naval infantry brigades, what they do is they go to other units and take the cream of those units who are already trained up and experienced soldiers and say, right, you're the best from those units, we're going to take you into this crack unit. That's how it would have been at the beginning of the war. And then as time went on, they were attrited, and because recruitment was an issue, they couldn't go around to all these other units because they were already sort of fighting and whatnot. So they ended up replacing their experienced troops with recruits. But that happened so much and so quickly, so fundamentally, that essentially those crack units were just diluted down relatively rapidly to being forces with a very low force quality. and the experienced troops were kind of that experience was unable to be transferred as effectively as one that would be reconstituting slowly, taking good soldiers, passing on experience, and doing it in a kind of orderly and long-term fashion. You're just like ramming in brand new recruits into, force mobilized soldiers into a crack brigade, starting from scratch, and then over relatively quick time period, that experience is kind of lost, and etc. etc. Well, this is sort of similar here, where they're not even replacing those troops lost in experienced units. They're just allowed to degrade, and they're taking the new recruits and they're just building entirely new units. And of course, there is no transfer of experience going on there. You've got like two separate units. It's not like these people are going into the units that really need them. That's the criticism here, and of course that's going to cause quite a lot of kickback. Here Shashant Joshi, quoting from the FT, says, despite these achievements, Ukraine's troops and their commanders are growing concerned over manpower problems, particularly the quality of new recruits and the speed at which they are injured or killed in combat. Is the quote. He goes on to say, grim and will have a knock-on effect on mobilization and the will to fight. Quote, the Ukrainian commanders estimated that 50 to 70% of new infantry troops were killed or wounded within days of starting the first rotation. Age is a key concern. The average person in Ukraine, in the Ukrainian military, is 45. Of about 30 infantry troops in the unit, said the deputy commander of the 72nd Brigade. On average, half were in their mid-40s, only 5 were under 30, and the rest were 50 or older. And this goes, obviously, Trump was talking about old men and small children. It's not quite that, and I was attacking that, but I did say yesterday they do have an issue with older people serving. Quote, perhaps inevitably Ukrainians' trust in Mr. Zelensky has fallen from 80% in May 2023 to 45% this year. According to America's National Democratic Institute, trust in the government in general is much lower still. Quote, Ukraine could produce more than 3 million short-range attack drones a year, for instance, but the army has only been able to contract for 1.5 million of them. Mr. Commission wants to fund domestic arms purchases by lifting export controls and selling weapons abroad. Now, that's a completely different subject that he's also quoting from in the article, but the main thrust of this is the way that they use their recruits, both in terms of training and then application to any given unit. Now, Euromaidan Press reports that, the Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, reports that the FSB have forces now fighting in the Kursk region. So these are they're special forces from the kind of Federal Security Bureau. The deployment of FSB special forces in Kursk Oblast revealed coordination issues within Russia's security apparatus, a recent analysis suggests. So the Russians putting up as much resistance as they can in Kursk and taking back some land, of course. The question is at what cost? If they are putting in their FSB special forces units to that kind of regular conventional armed forces theatre, I don't know if that's optimal really, or maybe it is. Maybe they're using these crack units for just quick special forces sorts of attacks. And good on them, but maybe it's like they did before. I talked about 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, like people like the VDV, like they're paratroopers often used in your bog standard conventional warfare rather than the quick crack warfare stuff that they should be used for, and just plugging them into general infantry assaults and whatnot is suboptimal for those people and their skills. And that leads to really high attrition rates of crack units unnecessarily. And that could be what's going on there with the FSB utilisation. But I don't know. This is complete speculation. Ukrainian General Intelligence cyber specialists attacked more than 800 servers across Russia recently. These are servers of military, administrative and financial institutions that support Russia's aggression against Ukraine. The loss of data led to a partial or complete shutdown of a number of institutions. They need to spend time and money to restore the servers. However, the destroyed information cannot be recovered. So it'd be interesting to see what the finer details of that particular attack were, but There are many ways that this war is being conducted, and cyberspace is, of course, one of them in this hybrid warfare scenario we are in. And I say we because we're all in it. We are all living in countries that have been affected in some way by cyber warfare or in information warfare. So, yeah. That is a big old we, so to speak. Anyway, thank you for listening. Really appreciate your support. Thank you for all the kindness from yesterday in well-wishing and whatnot. Really did appreciate that. And a big shout out to the following, just rather quickly, if you would allow me. I know I did this somewhat yesterday, but Yoshen Alfez, thank you. Axel Granersdorf, Mark Bizque, Mark Beaumont, Andres Erdovics, as ever. Anthony Diarnowski, really, really kind. Andre Katuza, Stephen Churchill, V.I. Pomeroy, Axel Granersdorf again, Bosjan Korensan, and Walter Piker, really kind. Adrian Jacks, really kind, and Stuart Stevens as well. Thank you so much, all of you. Really kind. It allows the channel to keep going. So thank you. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.